have liftoff. I hope you're ready. You didn't say go, so too late.
Born ready.
Unless you want to restart. Yeah. Well, we'll back up. Let's do this again.
Listen, guys. Jordan and I were born ready for this show.
We were born ready.
We came out of the womb thinking, let's have a podcast. Let's do a testing normal.
Fruit of the womb.
True to the womb. Wow, guys. Welcome back. Welcome back. Episode Buck 13. Buck 13 going strong.
113. Isn't that wild?
That is wild. That's really cool, actually. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Something I was thinking about this week, and maybe y'all can give me some insight into this. It seems like a pretty silly thing that we have pennies. Do you think, when we mentioned the Buck 13, I feel like, do we need pennies?
We don't.
Does a currency ever have to round to a hundredth of a decimal point of currency? I think it's a little silly. A little silly, personally.
I would agree. My dad thought you were bigger in real life from Alaska. He's in Alaska right now. Isn't that wild?
Whoa!
I know.
Whoa, Corky. Good for you, man. Are you fishing?
He was.
Catching some halibut?
We were going to drive there together.
Which I don't think there's halibut in Alaska. Probably.
I'm sure there is. Not like in Alaska, but in the ocean there are.
Landlocked halibut in Alaska.
But yeah, we were going to drive there. He's like, called me one day and he's like, hey, do you think you could drive to Alaska with me? I was like, I don't know. I think it's May. Wait, no, that's not how you ask it. Would you? Yeah, that's proper grammar. I didn't correct his grammar, but then we found out we couldn't get through the border because neither one of us have the vaccine. So.
Oh, really?
Nor was I going to, even if I had it, nor was I going to upload it to the Canadian government so that they could feel comfortable about, having shadows around. People are afraid of their shadows.
But you could probably have flown, right?
Yeah, but he needed me. He wanted me to drive with him in his new Jeep, go up there, and then he was going to fly me back.
Cool.
And then he would drive back later. So he didn't get to take the new Jeep up there, but he did fly. And
is he doing a solo trip right now?
He went to see his friend Mark, Mark and Rita both say hi. So I say hi too.
Cool.
Hi back.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Rita.
We say this about Mark. Mark is not someone you meet. He's someone you experience. That's very much true. And someday if you meet him, you'll know exactly what I mean. It's great. It's a good experience. I'll say that. I'm not being mean. He's an experience. So
he's just a very unique individual. A lot of special skills.
He has very refined skills. I will say that.
Oh, I like that.
Yep.
Okay. He has a very certain particular set of skills.
Yes. Technology is not one of them. It is very much not one of them. And I would say most people who are gaining in age aren't, but there's a few that are. But he is particularly sets the bar high in the level of not understanding technology, and I think he's fine with me telling the world that. It's just not his strong suit, as mine is not psychotherapy, and that's his. So.
There you go.
So
the psych man.
The psych.
I like
man.
it.
Yes. So
I like it. That's awesome.
So the whole change thing.
Canada,
by the way, there was like a TIL. Did you have a TIL about money today, or no?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
I'll
have to check. I'll tell you right now.
No, you don't. Maybe I did.
Nope.
I don't want to spoil it now. I do. I'm not going to bring it up now. Your change thing is very fitting when we get to the end of the show, and we'll talk about that. So I was like, wait, does he have that one too? I was just making sure. I just had to check the show notes. We do not have a double up. I routinely will read the first word of things that Curtis puts in our show notes so as to not spoil them, but also to make sure that I don't double up on things. He does not pay me the same courtesy because if I put them in first, inevitably I will have like 2 or 3 that are the same as his, and I have to go find new things. So, that's where that's at.
So, because sometimes, anyways, show notes. Sometimes I'll put my notes in a different section and not in that and then I'll transfer them over, and so I don't see it until I transfer them over later. Anyway,
right? No, I'm with you.
But
It's usually because I don't share them with you too soon. So anyway, I want to say at the onset of this, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about kind of relates to the title that I gave this show. I always try to, like, if people don't understand, like sometimes we don't talk about the title. It's mostly just to antagonize people enough to like maybe give it a chance and watch the show. And I don't mind offending or bothering people, so usually I'll do that. But tonight, I really like this phrase, and it's called transitory inflation because it just sounds. It sounds like it's so many different directions. It could be so many different things. It could be something super offensive. It could be me saying things about your own personal choices. It could mean that you're homeless. Or in this case, it could mean the government told us at the beginning of the year that inflation was going to be temporary. And now we're gaining signs that potentially it's not. And I think that a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight has a lot to do with that. So
fair enough.
Let's go on.
Well, definitely not related to inflation.
It probably
any
is.
way, shape, or form. But we might be able to find a connection to it. We might be able to find a link to it somewhere. We probably could. But there's a really kind of funny and hilarious situation going on in Ohio lately. And there's a gentleman, and they're dubbing him basically the serial pooper, and he's been going around to at least
you might say transitory pooper.
Transitory pooper. This guy has been going around to at least 18 different neighborhoods.
Oh my gosh!
Since 2012.
What?
And he's pooping on people's cars. He just poops on their hoods on those cars. And so this one guy, this dad, his poor daughter, her car had been pooped on seven different times.
I have to say, if he's only done it like at 18 different neighborhoods, is he like stopped up? He just ends up having to go. But it sounds like he picks his favorites and he sticks with them.
Yeah, it gets him going. So he pooped on all these different neighborhoods, and the dad finally realized his daughter is like a target after 7 times her car's been pooped on. So he put a camera.
It took 7 times for him to realize that.
Yeah. He put a camera, and the guy does it like at nighttime usually. And so they got a picture of this guy with his like bare butt looking at the camera while he's taking a poop.
So did they catch him?
It's not like, well, no, they haven't caught him yet.
What? He's still at large, huh?
Huh. The picture's a little bit granulated. He's wearing a hoodie.
Well, of course.
With a cap.
You want to make sure that you're well protected.
Right. The dad was like, he messed with the wrong guy.
Well, see, I thought with that title that they like caught him, that the dad like beat him up or something. Like, that's brave if the guy is, doing that. Like, you got to like be ready to dodge and weave and get out of the way. But he didn't catch him yet, so all right.
Well, no, and this guy thought for the first several times he didn't know it was human poop. He thought it was some like neighborhood kids that were putting dog poop on the hood of her car.
That's the thing. Like, they're very different. Like.
He said the first time, he's like, it's just these crazy kids. And then he's like, but it happened 6 more times.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
So anyways, they haven't caught it.
Transitory pooper.
Transitory pooper. If you guys hear or know of anybody out there with a connection or a link to a gentleman pooping on people's cars in Ohio, please reach out to your Facebook community.
Local law enforcement. Yeah. Oh, okay. So moving along to something else. We've talked on here a few times, and we've gone back and forth, and you and I can't even talk tonight, have had discussions about people getting censored on certain social platforms. So Twitter, Facebook. We know that Orange Man Bad got taken off these different ones. He's created his own blog or whatever that he now posts on. But Facebook and Twitter both, through the whole thing, and we talked about the Senate trials, you can go back and listen to it, and they said, no, we don't do that. There's no AI. We're not linked up. Fine. Turns out there's tons of evidence that they are. And now today, of all people, I pull up an article from Wall Street Journal, like not a place that I'll admittedly say I don't go read. I don't subscribe to them. I really don't want to give any money to them. It's fine if someone listening wants to, but I'm not a big fan. But I pull up, and now they're calling Facebook out because they have leaked evidence that they are doing this, and I'm gonna pull up this page because it's kind of interesting. So you go to their page and it's just quotes from Facebook. We're not actually doing this. Facebook routinely makes exceptions, like, and then it goes on to show, and then there's this giant paywall that you can't get out. But Facebook says its rules apply to all, but the company documents reveal a secret elite is exempt. And someone had put out who the exempt was, and I don't know if I have that in my show notes at all. But there was lists of people that they basically say they can say what they want. So what say you? Like, we've had a lot of discussions about this. Like, companies can do what they want. If they pick and choose,
right.
I feel like, and we've had this conversation as well, they can control people's emotions. They show people what they want to either make them angry. Facebook admitted to trying to make people angry. And now if they control what people see, they can kind of control thought in a way. And if they're picking and choosing who they want to be exempt from it, I see it as dangerous, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great conversation because it kind of boils down to the degree of importance we place on these companies. Like, do they get to the point where they're considered a utility? Are they considered at what point does a company basically fall under that line of necessity? So like, I think, for example, on the opposite extreme, like you would see maybe like I don't know, a car dealership or any type of company, like a smaller company, and they have reviews. Let's just use reviews as an example. And I never trust reviews of a company from their own website. Because, right, it's them choosing what they want to show and what they want to, like, kind of edit.
Right.
And so I kind of interpret that from Facebook's side of things. Like, they are kind of choosing what they want to make their company more popular, right? So they know if this is a famous individual and he makes this comment, people are going to flock to their site to see that comment. And then that's going to increase their user base and potentially their revenue in the long run, yada, yada, yada. So if it comes down to the point where Twitter, Facebook, a lot of these large social media platforms, maybe it's the number of users, maybe it's the number of people using it as a resource, I guess. So maybe that's what qualifies them. And if it's a utility, then I think that is wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, because it kind of comes down to, like, if someone was on the phone and they were talking about politics that somebody didn't like, and then AT&T was like, hey, you know what, we're just going to cut this person off because we don't like that they talk about Trump, or we don't like that they talk about being pro-life, or we don't like that they talk about conservative values, or that they don't like masks, or that they are, hesitant towards
or the
anything.
opposite. Yeah.
Like, or the opposite,
or that they don't,
or any of that. I'm just picking the things that I know that they have been censoring people for. That would be, people would.
But this article is interesting because they specifically call out that they allowed Trump to do a lot of things that they wouldn't have allowed a lot of other people. Although ultimately, eventually, they obviously banned Trump from their platform. But initially, Trampity Trump was saying things that other people would not have been allowed to have said because he fall under that popular category.
Yeah, and
the
courts ruled that because he had blocked some people apparently early on, and that went to court, and they said, oh, you can't block people because it's a public square. So the courts actually ruled it a public square and said he couldn't block anybody. So they'd already kind of upheld that. So there isn't a list. I looked at my other link. They just named the program. It's called XCheck, according to internal documents obtained by Wall Street Journal.
But it's a fascinating conversation because does a company, and it's not actually that abnormal for a company to have people that they give extra privileges to. That's not actually that crazy of a concept. Like Delta or whatever, like if somebody brings their company more revenue, they get put into a
for
special
advertising,
right?
But not that they could be free to talk about whatever they want and other people get blocked for it. The examples that I've heard are, one was Brandon Straka, he's a homosexual guy who started the walkaway movement. He's conservative. He's realized that there was a lot of values that did not go along with what he said, and he wanted to start to push people towards more conservative thinking, or more, probably, I would say, like libertarian Republican, somewhere in that area. But he wasn't ever like he was never mean about it or anything. His whole thing was not to be mean, just to be nice and have a conversation. His entire Facebook group, which he kept it to the group, was removed one morning, and people that he paid, they had like they were private consultants that maybe didn't even agree with him, that just were paid to moderate and manage his page to make sure nothing dangerous is on there. They lost their accounts too, and access to all the pages that was their job, because their accounts were
Yeah,
just
it's
tied to
fascinating.
his. So I would say in that case, like those people, it is a utility. It's their job. It's their income. They weren't necessarily tied to that organization. They were just helping to moderate, which is what Facebook wanted anyway. They wanted to make sure there wasn't anything
Yeah, it's
radical.
like it's almost like if other people are making money off of your company, then should your company be regulated with what policies they can
Right.
have? That's yeah, it's a tricky one. Also, you see there's a message
I
that
do see
people
that.
are requesting you to turn your
I can't
lights
find
on,
the remote
just so
to
you know.
them. That's the problem.
I
They
know.
may honestly, guys, you guys might have the ones that unplugged them. So, but yeah, and then
Mm-mm.
the other example that I heard too before we move on too quickly was that there was a mom who was removed for something that she posted, but her school requires that she be in the group so that she can get the information about getting her kids to school and school programs and everything. And when she got removed, she no longer could be contacted by the school or see the information for her kids' programs. So in that
Yeah,
case, it's like,
Josh.
there you
Josh
go.
made a good point, and this is something that I've always been kind of conscious of and brought up as well. Josh pointed out, he's like, once you start being Big Brother, though, there's no line in the sand. You can look for one all you want, but there's none because it keeps moving. Potentially, like Big Brother regulates what you can do, and then it kind of keeps shifting to what you basically until they control it.
Right.
Um, but if it comes down to being a utility, then there has to be some type of regulation in the form of like it has to be an option to be able to be used. Now, I think somebody might be able to get banned from having a phone line if there was some type of nefarious criminal activity that they were doing. I don't know what that would be. Um,
Well, it would be if
I
there
guess
was like criminal intent, and that's the case with that's how free speech works. Is if I say I I feel like killing someone, that's a dumb thing to say, but it's not illegal. Now, if I say tomorrow at noon I'm going to kill Joe Smith, that's intent. Like that's when you. So yeah, if that was
sorry,
on
Joe.
there, then yeah, sorry, Joe Smith. I've tried to think of a name that I don't know anyone with that name. Hopefully not. Joe, I'm not coming after you. So yeah,
Well, on a
I think that's what
lighter
it is.
note,
Yeah,
for
let's move on.
individuals that are really concerned about this, and you've probably already heard about this as well, but there's a pretty big kicker, a record kicker that's supposed to be coming next year, an Oregon taxpayer kicker, like $1.9 billion or something like that. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, when I read it, I got really excited. I thought we all got $1.9 billion. Turns out, it turns out that's not the case.
Because
And
because and that won't affect inflation.
no, not at all. Well, if we want to be real about this, where this money came from is the printed money that was just given out to states.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
that is inflation. I mean, when they did that, I mean, people. Here's the thing. It's like you got to like back up and look at numbers, and this is something that my dad could relate to. Like, hey, let's just do the math for just a moment here. You guys realize like the amount of money that we printed, the $6 trillion or whatever just for this last year, is the equivalent of putting $70,000 of debt on every single person in the United States. Like, that's a lot of money
Yeah.
to just all of a sudden, whew, there it is. Like it just, whoo, we're going to put that into the system. And I was trying to explain what inflation is to someone the other day. And because they were like, how does that work? I was like, well, imagine y'all were locked in a room. There's 10 of you and you each had $10. There's $100 that float around the room and you had to survive trading that money between each other. And then partway through, somebody dropped the $100 bills into the room. Now your $10 that you have is worth substantially less. Like everything's going to now cost more. People are like, well, there's way more money in circulation and everything. Well, that's how it works at a mass level when you just start doing that. Because if you have something and then all of a sudden there's more of it, then it's worth less. It's like if someone had a bar of gold and they're the only person with a bar of gold, and then all of a sudden someone shows up and they have 100 bars of gold, that one bar of gold it's worth a lot less money because there's more of it. It's a simple supply and demand. And
Yep.
when we put that much money, like an incomprehensible amount of money out into, floating around. Now, what's funny is statistically, I heard at least when that was going around, 60% of that went into investments of some sort, like whether it was cryptocurrency or the stock market or even just hard assets. Like that's where a lot of it went, which is good, except it wasn't doing what it was technically supposed to do, which was to be spent in the system. I think it's better because when we go into this, when we start looking at inflation, and now we have the Federal Reserve, and I'd started to say this in our notes and apparently did not type it all the way out in our intro, that they introduced this week and said 5.2% is what we're looking at for this year for inflation. And then they're saying in the next 3 years, another 4. Well, if the Federal Reserve is saying that, my mind immediately goes, it's probably worse than that. Like, because everything they've told us so far has always been like, well, it's only going to be this. Like, well, first off, it was transitory inflation. It was just going to be around for a little bit while we're short on some things, and shipping took some time. There's less workers and all that, but then we're gonna pump all this money into the system. It's not what they're saying now is it's no longer transitory. It's here to stay. Prices are going to go up. Your dollar is going to be worth less if you put money into your savings account and you pull it out 5 years from now. It's going to be worth less than it was when you put it in, even though it's the same dollar amount. So it just drives people to not save.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
I think that there's a few other options there.
I do too.
As far as like whether your money's worth less in 5 years than what it is
well,
now. Well, no, that's true. It always is that case.
Well, it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
but yes, it always is. And it used to be that interest rates, you get paid money for the money that went into your account, and you get interest. And I remember as a kid, you could do the math, and it wasn't a lot, but I mean, it was over 2%.
I think the highest interest rates I've ever seen were, well, on a savings account, I guess, if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
like a savings account.
Just
I think
a regular
the highest interest rate
account.
I ever saw was, I think I saw 5% one time.
Right.
And that was like an online, ally or something.
Right,
like that.
and if you put into like bonds back in the day, they would return 5 to 7%, and then at that point, like, you wouldn't necessarily risk everything into a market or something like that that has potential, that has more risk. But now, with this amount, they have to somehow get this money back out of the system. I believe, and what I'm hearing around is that they're going to try to push deflation to some extent, which can be good and bad. But what it means is the banks start making less money on what they loan. So there's been people that have stopped getting personal lines of credit, which probably isn't the greatest idea to get in the first place. But then there's places that operate like their payroll on credit, which makes sense for like liquidity and stuff like that. And them being denied. And if the bank loses money lending money, they're no longer going to do it. And it sounds a lot like some other things that have happened in our history.
Well, it's interesting because like Europe right now, if you put money in a bank in the EU, generally, they charge you to keep that money in the bank, which is fascinating. Yeah. So, I mean, that is a potential that we could get to that point.
Which is why, like, we would talked about these other companies that are like, hey, if you put your money in here as the US dollar and you provide liquidity to what we're doing, we'll pay you 7.5% interest up to $50,000, which is, that's a decent amount of money. I mean, it's like $500 a month that you're making off of that. No, 350. My math's off. Yeah. Anyway, but still, that's a decent chunk of change in just interest of just doing nothing, just letting it sit there and letting it ride. What that does is it promotes saving. It promotes being wiser with your money, spending less than you make. And it seems like we've gotten away from that, and we kind of have to. And you have to, like, this is where you have to, like, I had to sit down and like almost like visualize shapes and stuff to realize like our US economy or our US government benefits. They make money during inflation. We don't, but they make money during inflation.
Interesting.
So
does that help pay down debt then?
No. They
national
just keep
debt.
selling debt as if it's never going to come to fruition. But they,
Right, but then how does that make them money?
because they're creating it, and they get to have interests like loaning it. Our one export is money. Like our one export is U.S.
Mm-hmm.
dollars.
Hmm. Interesting. I remember I've probably said this before, but I remember my dad telling me like their first house they bought or something like that. Yeah, I think it was the first house they bought. The interest rate was 17.5%. Their first mortgage
Yeah, I've
interest rate. I
talked
was
to
like,
people. Their first was like
ah,
was like
17 or
21%.
can you imagine that type of interest rate when but also, you weren't dealing with back then, generally most houses weren't
And
$400,000,
this is
right?
true.
Or
And this goes back
500,000.
to the WTF happened in 1971.com that we talked about last week,
Mm-hmm.
where the average house price was nowhere near what it was based on income, because our income has not risen at the same rate as everything else. So that's where I say, like, it used to be that like people would survive off one income. Like a family could survive with one income, and most people would do okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or if not
Yeah.
if not okay, like pretty well. Um,
Right.
but now it's near impossible to do that. At least having
Mm.
the
You
other
know, going
parent working a little bit.
going back, thinking back onto
Mm-hmm.
things. This is something I don't know if you remember hearing about this, and maybe anybody out there that's listening, tell me if you guys remember hearing about this. I remember like in the 90s watching PBS or OPB with my dad, like OPB News, and I remember them talking about bringing woolly mammoths back. And
Is this pre
and I
Jurassic
remember
Park?
I remember thinking, yeah, I think this was pre Jurassic Park probably. And I remember thinking like, oh, maybe it was after. I don't know. Probably around the same time. But I remember thinking like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. Like, there's gonna be a real woolly mammoth walking around the earth pretty soon here. And nothing happened. Nothing came from it. Never came through fruition. But
But
now apparently, now apparently it's gonna happen. This
we're
is
gonna
what's
bring one back.
going down.
How? Cloning it?
So they have they're starting with basically they have actual well preserved baby mammoth um, remnants that they've gotten from uh, the Arctic tundra.
I was waiting for you to say
And
like the woolly mammoth factory, or like.
the baby woolly mammoth factory. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
that would
and
preserve them though.
Haley saw this,
Oh, good. Then it
um,
must be true.
and it's gotta be true then. Me and Haley, with our forces combined, science, cha-ching. Um, and so, anyways, they're gonna start combining the DNA with that they have from this baby woolly mammoth,
Okay.
and they're gonna start using part of the DNA from this baby woolly mammoth and splicing it into the genes with a
Please don't say. Please don't
like I
say
think it's
frogs. Please don't say frogs.
oh my god, humans.
Okay,
Um,
that's fine.
no,
China's already doing that,
Asian
probably.
elephants. So basically, they'll just breed it back
So it's
into
not really
the
a
woolly
woolly
mammoth.
mammoth. Like,
Well, eventually, it'll get closer and closer to that genetic makeup
wow,
because so like they use an Asian elephant
two of them,
embryo,
hopefully.
uh, egg,
Okay.
and then they use the DNA from this baby woolly mammoth that they have
Okay.
preserved, and they use the stem cells with that.
We're
And those stem
something
cells,
bad is going to
they
happen.
implant.
This is how we get monsters. This is where
I'm okay with some
Godzilla
monster
comes
elephants.
from. It's Pacific Rim all over again. Like they're
So basically, it's a combining of using those stem cells with the egg, and then that stem cell, which has the DNA makeup of the woolly mammoth, starts to replicate, right? And then they get basically it's like close to half woolly mammoth, half Asian elephant. And then that elephant, what they use is that elephant's DNA with another stem cell from the original woolly mammoth, and then they get closer to 75%, and then they get closer to 90%, and then they get closer to 100%, basically. Eventually, I don't know. This is just a theory, but there's a reason behind them making the woolly mammoths. They want to bring the woolly mammoths back because they're concerned about the tundra that is receding right now, and they are trying to get these elephants that can start surviving in that colder temperature because when the tundra is starting to defrost or whatever. I guess there's some issues with the defrosting and the CO2, and they think that if the elephants are around, it's actually going to help with eating some of the
CO2
breakdown of the of the plants that cause, I don't know exactly what it is. Somehow these elephants are supposed to help if they can get them in this cold tundra.
This is the beginning of all monster movies. They're like, we're gonna solve this problem with this thing, and then we're dead. Like, we're gonna create this island, and there's a helicopter. Guy comes in, he's like, whoa, that's a big pile of poop, and then they like somehow some frogs are involved, and they evolve, and they have babies, and everyone dies. Like, that's what's gonna happen. That's just, yeah, I mean, I hope it works.
Yeah.
I guess. Not what I said.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong.
It's interesting.
Although,
I don't
it'd
know
make for a really good movie.
But I would like to see a woolly mammoth.
I would too. Yeah. I always heard that woolly...
Out of all the dinosaurs or prehistoric times, it wouldn't be my favorite.
I've read about some woolly mammoths. But I always understood them as being temperate. Like, we always think of them as being in the ice and stuff like that because they're always in pictures of the Ice Age. But they would have lived more close to the equator is what I've always learned. Like, they were a more temperate animal, which is why they died off. I don't know. I'm not a woolly mammoth expert, and I don't know that any of us are because we just know that they existed. We've never seen one, and it sounds like we're just gonna get like a half version of one or something. So,
well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they'll. I don't know. Maybe they won't. I would be okay with it. I would honestly prefer them to bring back another animal. That would be even a little
saber-toothed tiger. Like, be kind of cool.
Maybe I don't know if I want a tiger.
Don't say a dinosaur. There's no good outcomes from that. I mean, it's cool. It sounds neat, but even on an island, they somehow make it back to New York, and
I think giant turtles. That could be cool.
Okay with that. I feel like I'd outrun a turtle.
Right? Giant turtles.
Yeah.
Could you outswim a turtle?
No, not at all. But you could ride on their backs like Nemo and probably get somewhere like pretty fast.
Or Dr. Doolittle. Remember, like the old movie, Dr. Doolittle, like he rode on the back of giant sea turtle.
I don't think I've seen that. Now I need to go see that.
It's like from the 80s or 90s, maybe.
And then remade with the blackface guy, Robert Downey Jr. Okay. Okay, here's a more heavy topic. Not sure if some of you guys have read this. I was telling Curtis about this. I said, if you hear about these kids in Florida, and he named something else that sounded bad too, but it wasn't as bad as this. The quote on the title was, "He's just a little boy," and a mom is crying as these two teens were arrested in Florida for plotting a Columbine-style school attack. Now, it didn't take place, which is good, and we were kind of talking about this beforehand when we were making all the hand motions. Well, actually, that wasn't what we were talking about. We were just trying to confuse everyone. But they were caught. They were turned in by some of their peers. And the detectives found that they had some maps, and they were trying to plot on how to get weapons on the black market, and had all the cameras mapped out. And they were very, very obsessed with Columbine. If those of you that are old enough to remember when that happened, it was this horribly devastating school shooting that did not end well even for the shooters. But they were caught, and that was... What was you?
It's crazy the age of those kids.
I know, 13 and 14. Your comment was the best, I think, before we started. You were like, how could the mom think that?
Oh, no. You were saying...
Or how could she say he's just a little boy and like not, and after hearing what they had plotted?
No. I was saying there's probably something wrong with the parents.
Yes,
and you're like,
that is right.
Like any kid could get to that point. And I was like, well, yeah, but there's something wrong with the mom. Like, there's obviously something wrong because the first instinct of the mom is to just be like, brush off what was going on. So, and it's, and not that it's actually, I don't actually think it's wrong for the mom to say he's just a little boy.
No, I'm not laughing at you either. I'm laughing at a comment that just came in.
Yeah.
So.
Oh no, Gary, did you see Gary's comment that I laughed at?
No.
Gary made a comment about, he said that we were talking about the dinosaurs. And then he's like, just wait till one of those things.
Oh, that was Dave. Dave said that. They're brothers. They're brothers, so they're easily mistaken. But
okay.
But yes.
Yeah, that was funny.
My dad said, I'll put it up here on the screen, was explaining to Mark, you all had discussed cryptocurrency a couple of weeks ago, and Mark said to him, "Oh yeah, Superman." Like,
Oh, like kryptonite.
right? Yeah, I guess.
Classic.
Or it sounds like a
Maybe
superhero is my thinking. I don't know. Like,
Marvel. Is that what you guys are talking about? Marvel, right?
before Columbine was
That's awesome.
Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake. He was only 14. Whoa. Wait, I don't understand what you're saying, Amador. Like the guy was there?
I'm guessing there was a killer in Moses Lake.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
Your sentences are running together. You could explain. Um, go on. Yeah, my dad says about Mark exactly what I was saying earlier is just a different kind of brilliant, always entertaining. Yes.
A school shooting. Yeah.
My dad,
So Amador with you.
the school shooting. Yes. Um, my dad and Mark are interesting friends. I think if you met them together, you'd say, how did they become friends? And I think they maybe wonder that, but they're really good friends. They have very different skills.
I love seeing old guys that have remained friends.
Yes.
Like going from, when they were younger to older, like, because usually, not always, but guys in particular, sometimes it can be easier to like let things go and just kind of move on with life. But when you maintain friendships, especially from multiple states away, like that's like not a common trait, like bond to be able to hold on to. So that's cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Speaking of holding on to things,
Oh, gosh.
something I'm a little bit not nervous about, but I think it's important. So this is I kind of see something happening in Afghanistan.
That was
right
really
now.
weird looking because you couldn't see your cup and you were just looking down. You're like, something happened, and you're just like staring down. Like, I'm not sure about holding on to this. I'm like, oh, what are we talking
Uh-oh.
about? Like, oh, there's a cup. Okay, good.
No, nothing that crazy.
Yes, in Afghanistan.
So this is something I predicted. I think I talked to you about this, not on podcast, but so when the Taliban took over Kabul and then the remaining territories, there was concern about the Taliban having access to the funds that the United States government and a lot of other governments had given the Afghanistan government. And it was like $70 billion or something like massive, right? And they were running out of money, though, basically, like within the first few days. And so now a lot of people are starting to recognize they're going to start starving in Afghanistan pretty soon here because they don't have the resources, the funds that they were basically significant amount of funding was going to them to just get food. And so they're talking about not just the regular population, but they're saying right now they're estimating about 1 million children in Afghanistan are going to have acute severe malnutrition this year. And a lot of them are going to die, they're concerned about. And so I'm starting to see this, and now they're talking about funding and like, okay, well, we need to start giving money to the kids so that way, or to the country so that they can get the food.
The problem is
you can't trust that organization right now, right?
well, not only that, like if you just step back and look at it and go, even if it wasn't, say they weren't a militant group, say that they were just a group that came in and now are leading the country, right? Just take away the awfulness that they are. They aren't equipped, regardless of anything, for running a modern society, like one that deals in that level of complexities. I mean, the sheer fact that our country doesn't fall apart, one might argue that it is amazing. But to have people that basically are like the hill people in Star Wars coming down and running a country is, even removing all those other complexities is insane to think about.
Well, that's interesting because I listened to a podcast specifically about this, and that's why the Taliban were really concerned about what's called the brain drain. When people were flying out of Afghanistan that were Afghanis that had a lot of technical skills, had a lot of higher education, they were concerned that these individuals were leaving because they had the skill sets to maintain like the electricians, the water rights, all these certain facilities.
Shocking that they didn't want to stay, right? Like,
right. I
mean,
and so what's happening is these Afghani, leaders or these Taliban leaders are telling people like, hey, we will not take your position from you. Like, we want you to stay in this position of the water minister or whatever, like the head of this. You'll have oversight from the Taliban, but we're not going to tell you how to run this water line because this is on you. We don't have these expertise, right? So they're starting to recognize, like, yeah, we don't have the skill sets to maintain these power lines, to maintain this type of stuff. So I think the sheer need of necessity will hopefully put pressure on them. But getting back to the humanitarian,
but how are they going to get those people? Like, that's the thing, is like, who in their right mind, regardless of the position, is going to go and be under that kind of rule?
No.
Like,
that's why they were limiting flights out of the airport.
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying.
Because they did not want to lose the people that knew how to do that stuff as well. But anyways, so an answer to this issue is a lot of organizations like UNICEF and a couple other like Red Cross are starting to say, hey, don't give the money to the Afghan government. Have that funding go through our organizations to then provide the food and the resources to these governments, which I feel like is actually at least a safer way of not directly giving it to the Taliban. Like if just
you can't give it directly to them. They're just, the kids would still be malnourished and whatnot. It's like giving it's like giving money to parents that still have, that are like, say someone's like addicted to drugs and you're giving them money expecting them to buy food for their kids. They're not gonna do that. And it's not because necessarily they just may not be in the right mind to do it. Like the safest, best way to do it is to either remove the child and feed them or just give food. As sad as that situation is, it's very similar in this case. That's I just thought about this, the statistical probability of people that have lived in the mountains coming down and like running a country. It's just not, it's only a matter of time before it just falls apart. Like it becomes, the hills are now the city buildings. Like they aren't going to be able to maintain any of that. And the people are going to be the ones that suffer, the people that can't get out. It's sad.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
It's sad. So that's most of the main things I wanted to hit on this week.
Well, so there's
thing you want to hit on?
We got the whole Newsom thing going on in California. I don't know if you want to discuss that at all. We don't have a lot of details because we don't know. The early voting started now. I think the actual vote starts tomorrow on the 14th, I believe.
Right.
There's been reports coming out, even like I try to look local first because that's kind of where it matters. And even local reports are saying there's a group of people, like a substantial amount in pocketed areas, that are saying they either got sent double ballots. I actually just had a tweet pop up of someone else saying, hey, I have a friend who lives in the area and got multiple ballots to their name that are identical mailed to them, and people going to the polls saying that they say they already voted and they can't. They had to fill out provisional ballots.
So the entire issue with, and I know we've talked about this before, and there's a concern for access to resources. But I think a majority of our voting should be electronic on our phones now, because so many people, and I know there's a whole resource and technology issue and all that sort of thing, but I could be wrong. But I think the majority of society has some form of a phone that has internet accessibility. I think majority of society does. Is that not true?
I used to agree with you. Yeah, I think they mostly do. The problem is this, and I hadn't thought about it from this angle before, is that when you do fully digital reporting, you can falsify back to someone that they voted a certain way and still behind the scenes vote the other way. And that's the problem with doing a fully vote by digital.
But how does it doesn't get falsified to the actual final count though?
It can. So that's the thing, is you can show someone, and that's what happened. That's what people were saying happened in the Venezuela stuff, that the way that they did it is you would go in, touch who you'd vote for. Just like, imagine that's your phone instead of the printout that it gives you. Mm-hmm. The printout would give them a QR code that if they went and that it would said on it who they voted for that they touched on the screen. But when you took the QR code, the only place it could be read was by the voting machine. So they would scan the voting machine and it would vote for them. Okay. But if you went into the code, you could see that the QR code voted for however they wanted them to. And the printout was who they clicked on the screen. And so when you do that, when you hide how the vote happens, and that's why I've kind of gone the opposite direction.
But you could make it an open source kind of thing to
You
visualize
could,
how
but
the
you
votes
need a
are going.
backup that could always be done. So what I think
Which I think is easy.
my well, it isn't easy. It actually means people should go back to in person, because this is the way I think it should happen. And actually, I talked to the Oregon main voting guy about this, and he was like, "Oh, I like this idea," because their main problem is voter turnout and like getting people to realize that regardless of how you vote, it should be like a civic duty. Regardless of how we feel, we come out as a community and we do this thing together, right? Because it's a fundamental right to go out and do. And we used to, I don't know if you remember as a kid, I remember going to the community center and voting with my kids and learning about the polls, learning about what it was. You get a sticker. It was amazing. And it wasn't about like who each person was voting for. It was about the fact that we were all out doing the same thing on a mission, being a part of our community, but ultimately our country, and taking part in that freedom. So I think we should do that again. I think it should be on paper, but also electronic. The reason why is because I understand the expediency of getting the vote counted, but I think that the paper ballot should be QR coded to each person or blockchain to each person. Each person use it like a cryptocurrency, so it cannot be repeated. And that goes, you get a copy, and that copy goes in, and that gets counted by a whole entirely separate group of people over time, like throughout the next week. And then it also goes electronically to be tallied immediately, so that later on, this other group that's being monitored by, bipartisan people that all have to agree on each vote, if that doesn't line up with the electronic one in the end, then you can't falsify it. So it's basically you're creating a backup, a redundancy immediately, and the redundancy later is going to come in, and this both sides don't know which other one's doing, and they'd have to line up. And if they didn't, then we have a problem. And it would be similar to how blockchains work, but the problem is you can't do it in such a way that would instill trust. And that's the problem why people won't vote, is because they don't trust the system. So you have to build trust into the system, or else we're just going to continue to see what we are, where people are like, my vote doesn't count.
I think you can have a combination. I do agree. You can have a combination of paper votes and electronic votes. But I think if you have electronic votes that work, if you have people signing $600,000 agreements, mortgage loans with a DocuSign, I think we can make a way of creating a safe
you
network for
you
voting
can accept that
online.
only benefits two parties, so it's different than a giant conglomerate of people and believing that everyone got their vote counted the same way. So you have to have a way. I can prove that I went and signed
I
that.
think you could have an independent organization. That's not real. That's where
Right, but
you
when you
have a
sign those,
independent
you
organization.
e-sign them, but then you go in, it gets verified by someone who's a notary public. So there's two things created there. You're signing in the beginning as an agreement. When you get down to the end, there's a notary public that does it, and you show your identities, and they make sure legally that everything's taking place. And so there are both. But the one is really quick now. You notice how it used to be, you'd go in, it would take this whole long thing, but now it's just like, hey, come in, it's 5 minutes, boom, you're done. Like, and that's kind of the way that voting should be. But I think it should be for other reasons too. And that is just like, give people the day off, make it another holiday where people say, like, most all businesses, except for like very essential, people are off to vote. Like, and we do this as a country. And because I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't think
if
that's
it's
bad.
something
Yeah.
that's in our constitution and it's a fundamental right and it's something that we want everyone to do, I don't think we should go as far as some other countries that actually will fine you for not voting. I think that should be wrong. It should be a choice. But when you incentivize people up the wazoo to do it, I think that would be good. It would be good for everybody.
Hmm. Love it.
But also, you have to
Love
be
it.
31 to
All
vote because your brain's not developed yet.
right.
Just kidding.
Or 25. All right. All right, guys. Well, we're going to shower you
With some
with
thoughts.
some
Well, first we're going to do TILs.
delicious and delightful TILs, and then we're going to shower you with some more thoughts. All right. So, how about this? How about I have Trace and you have Dos? So I'll go first. I thought this is kind of cool for my science-minded individuals out there. Today I learned there is an element called promethium. It's so rare that it's estimated that there are between 500 and 600 grams of it on the entire Earth's crust. That's a pretty small amount.
That is.
500, 600
How do
grams
they
in the
know?
entire Earth.
And who has that?
I'm
And
not
why is
exactly
it called
sure,
promethium? I don't
but
like that.
I love it. It's like
It's
I
like
love it. But
Prometheus,
what's
which
also
did not
interesting
end
about
well.
it, it's one of the only radioactive elements that's followed by a stable element.
Oh, weird.
Which is really cool. That's really cool. Like it's very rare. Like there's two elements. I can't remember the name of the other one,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of the two elements that they've discovered that's followed by a stable element.
So would it be
which
dangerous
is
to like hold?
wild.
Because like, have you seen those charts where it's like we're gonna go through the periodic table, and by like 7 or 8, you're
I mean, it
dead?
has
Like
enough of it. Enough of it would cause
yeah,
harm
weird.
if you had enough of it. But there's only 600 grams on the whole Earth, so you're not going to find that much.
So this TIL comes. It was actually today. I learned this week, or this week I learned. My dad sent me this, and I was like, "Why is my dad sending me this?" And he's like, "Oh, this is for TILs." I was like, "Oh, all right. This is kind of gross, kind of interesting. I'll just show it to you because it's strange." So this week I learned through my dad via text that a clump of Elvis Presley's hair sold for over $72,000. It was roughly the size of a baseball and was auctioned off and sold for 72.5 on Saturday. The hair was from a bag of clippings originally belonging to Homer Gill, like you.
Hey.
Presley's personal friend and longtime hairstylist. Kind of gross, right?
Fascinating that guy held on to that.
It's kind of
like
creepy, right?
What was he doing with that hair?
The clump of hair was the most well-documented collection of Elvis Presley's hair in the world. There's more than one documented case? That's even weirder. Wow.
These people are crazy.
It's been sealed in a jar since it was acquired by our client. Well.
Okay, who's a current day person or musician that would be as famous as Elvis Presley?
There would also be dead, but Michael Jackson was probably even more worldwide known. But I can't think of any. We don't get stars like that anymore. Like to the point where they can't live life. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe movie stars.
Even then.
But not as much music
stars.
Not
as much, yeah.
Not as much. Today I learned that due to the fact that they spend the majority of their lives in the ice and or sea, polar bears are technically classified as marine mammals, like dolphins, seals, and whales.
It always weirds me out that whales are mammals. I believe it.
I love it.
They know more than I do.
Gives me hope someday I could live in an ocean.
I mean, you could now. It's just like not like the most ideal climate.
I get too pruny right now.
But doesn't the salt water help with that? Or is it worse? I don't know. We'll go with it.
We'll
go with it's better.
No, actually.
Might be better.
It wouldn't be worse. It'd be the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Nope.
No. Level of high concentration.
What does everyone else think? Yeah. Could you tell us in the chat? Today I learned that the U.S. convened a coin task force. This is where bookends. We did not plan this. To address a shortage in coinage. They determined that there isn't a shortage per se. Instead, too much of the $48.5 billion in the U.S. are not in circulation.
Yeah, they're made of jewels and on train tracks.
Or in those little coin smashers at the fair or wherever. Mm-hmm. Where'd all our pennies go? Yeah, pennies are worthless.
My last TIL. Ooh, we got 2 comments as far as who they think famous people are.
Justin
Bieber, Amador.
Elton.
I don't know if he's to Elvis level, but he might be.
Maybe amongst teen girls.
Yeah, and Elton John. Your mom. I love it.
Yeah, I think Elton John more back in the day.
Dancer.
Not as much now. Like I think a lot of people wouldn't know who he is now. But maybe back in the day.
Younger people, yeah. Today I learned that the ice at the North Pole is only approximately 2 to 3 meters or 6 to 10 feet thick, which is shocking. I thought it's thicker than that. The North Pole ice is only 6 to 10 feet thick, while the Arctic Ocean ice is between about 2.5 miles thick.
Whoa.
Guys, how nuts is that?
That's substantially
North,
different.
10 feet. South, 2.5 miles or 4,000 meters.
So why doesn't Santa live in the South Pole?
I know.
This seems way more
48,000 feet deep. Wow. That's
well,
awesome.
we know that they're all ice caps anyway, and the Earth is flat, right? Like they connect that ice wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously.
So yeah, it's subjective.
Space is only up, guys. The Earth is flat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shower thoughts. All right, I'm gonna go first. The scariest thing to see when camping alone at night, it's not a bear or a polar bear. It's a human.
Especially if you're camping way out in the woods.
Anywhere.
If you're
just
camping
like
at a
you're not
campsite,
expecting another person, I think that's way more terrifying than a bear.
If you're camping at what's it called? Burning Man, not as weird.
No.
But if you're camping out in the woods,
that's not camping though. That's being in the desert orgy.
It could be camping. Camping's camp. All right. So, ironically, having and raising a child is one subject that isn't frequently taught to us, but would greatly benefit us as a species to learn how to do it properly.
Yeah.
To a degree. The amount of time that you spend like learning math lessons and math class, you don't spend that many classes on how to raise kids.
No, I would agree. I think there's a lot of life skills that should be taught in school though. Like I think there should be civics class. Like how do you take place in your local government? How do you balance a checkbook? Well, I guess that's not really a thing anymore. But how do you balance your account?
There's home ec. I know there's home ec, or there used to be.
Yeah,
but it didn't
home
seem
ec
like it was
now
that.
Is everyone just goes to McDonald's. Apparently, in our town, like there's just you can't go get fast food. Not that I eat fast food, but I drive by the lines and I laugh and go, "You guys need to learn how to cook." Because, like you experienced with Taco Bell, you're like, why is the line so long? You just wanted to go there that night.
That was wild.
And it's been that way since it opened. I'm like, that's really sad. Like, do you guys...
I'm not going to go somewhere if there's a long line.
Do you guys know
how to...
that there can be food in your own house? You don't even have to leave.
All right.
Yeah.
Hit me.
Oh, because Santa's gang related. He wears red, is a blood, north. If he wore blue, he'd be a Crip from the south. Wow, that's a very deep thought there, Amador.
I didn't know Bloods and Crips were north and south. I thought it was all west and east, but...
Yeah, I spent the last 2 weekends with Amador. Not this last weekend, but the weekend prior and the weekend before that. And I still don't know his nationality. I'm still not 100% sure that he's telling me the truth.
I love that he can claim
and we were discussing that.
And
I he's still... I just don't know what to believe.
Take it.
He'd be whatever. Okay. Expiration dates are simply spoiler alerts.
True. Yeah. I like that. Okay, this is actually a thought that I literally had just thought about earlier today when I was eating lunch. A retirement facility on the... no. I wish.
You'd be going to the bathroom.
A retirement facility on the moon or Mars would be a really great place for elderly with mobility issues.
Yeah, at first, but then wouldn't it cause like atrophy more? Like,
but it wouldn't be as big of a deal. Like they'd have atrophy to the bone density, maybe, I guess, right? But the gravity is so much less that it wouldn't cause as much risk factors. I think that there would be other issues that lack of gravity would cause, like congestive heart failure issues, probably. But
pressure. Well, and then instead of like to get rid of him, you just like launch him off the moon, like it's just a big catapult. Well, we lost another one today.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Okay. We get so much space garbage anyway. So, you guys look it up. We have a genuine space garbage problem. We may get to the point where we have too much space garbage to actually leave this place. So we should be careful.
Starlink's not helping though right now.
You've watched Black Mirror, right?
Oh, all
okay, good.
Yeah.
The reason that there is no season 6 of Black Mirror is because we're in season 6.
Oh my god, so true. That is such a good point. Oh my god. That's amazing. I love it. Um, if every insect on the planet decided to work together to kill all humans, we would probably lose.
100%, hands down. If just the ants decided. Yeah.
Right? Because they could fit through tiny holes
Yeah, and lift a lot
and
of
find us.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like
Mm-hmm.
this idea. We'll stop talking about it.
Terrifying.
This episode's had a lot of like potential dinosaur problems, monster problems, and now insect problems. We just need to get away from that. Ravioli is the original hot pocket.
Hot pockets. Mm, love it. I haven't had a hot pocket in like 15 years.
I haven't either. I don't want one.
It's amazing.
There, it's like those pies. You remember when you could eat one of those and not feel like you were gonna die? Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes. Those
Those
are
cheap
those were
cherry
what were they
pies.
called?
They're
Yeah.
all kinds of things, but like
You could
now,
get
if
them
you
at
were to
gas
eat one,
stations.
you'd consume one and you would go into cardiac arrest like 3 blocks down the road.
That's hilarious. All right.
Yeah.
My last shower thought. There's an air marshal. There's a fire marshal. There's a field marshal. Why is there no water marshal?
I mean, there's lifeguards.
Yeah, and there's Coast Guard.
Sorry.
The
Sorry.
Coast Guard, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that there'd be a water marshal. I don't
Oh,
know.
Coast Guard. Yeah, that would be more. But lifeguard, I guess they protect you from water. I don't know.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's
gonna
weird.
I'm gonna give one more thing. It's just this is just for Mark in case he's still listening. But there's a joke he always, well, no, I should say always, frequently says, just as a reminder to everybody, that you can lead a horse to water, but a pencil must be led.
Hmm. That's true. But it's not lead anymore, right? It's graphite now.
That's true. Yes, which is what my dad
Classic.
always says, which is just funny, their relationship.
I love it. I love it. All right, guys.
It's
Well,
graphite.
it's a pleasure doing business with y'all. Pleasure having these
It's been great.
conversations, discussions, and deep thoughts. If you guys have any thoughts next time, always feel free to comment. We are always happy to have conversations about whatever your thoughts are on our topics. Even if you're making fun of us, we love it.
Yeah, we don't care. We find it
Don't forget
hilarious.
to subscribe. Hit the little like button. Subscribe on Facebook. Then you'll get some notices about when we're on live, I believe. Um,
Should.
do the same thing on Spotify. We wouldn't get live, but Spotify, iTunes. That way you can listen to us post episode if you have an easier time doing that.
And
And
if you
we
forget any of
appreciate you
that,
guys.
you can go to testingnormal.com and find all those fancy links
Yes,
or
absolutely.
links to pretty much all the things that we talk about. If you would like to
Codes.
go look at the articles that we grabbed them from.
Yep,
So,
that's right. All right, guys, have a fantastic week. Stay classy, and we will talk to you guys very soon.
see
Peace
you guys.
out.